This is Talk of the Devils, the athletic show dedicated to Manchester United. Coming up today, we'll react to probably the worst defeat in Manchester United's cup history, losing to League Two side Grimsby Town on penalties. We'll ask the question, where do United go from here? Where does the head coach, Ruben Amorim, go from here as well? And of course, it was another 24 hours full of transfer speculation, most notably about Kobbie Mainoo. We'll get into all of that as well and look ahead to what's become an absolutely huge football match against Burnley at the weekend too. As you can imagine, everyone is here. Laurie is still sampling Grimsby's finest guest house. I think that's how he described it before we came on this recording. I'll start with you, Laurie, to be honest, because you were there to witness that. A new low? Is that the best way we describe what happened?
Yeah, definitely a unique experience. In a weird way, it was kind of good to be there to witness in the the flesh. Because it was so mad. It was so unpredictable. I know that we've got to this stage now with United where all bets are off, really. But to go 2-0 down to a team in League Two, fourth tier, and to be much the worst team at that. Then you had the rain, the penalty shootout that went on forever, that had its own very many subplots in it. Ultimately, Ruben Amorim losing the tie, coming out afterwards and being so strong. We spoke to him on the pitch afterwards. We can get into exactly what he said and what that might entail. But just to be there was a kind of real eye-opener. I'm still here in Cleethorpes, not quite Grimsby, as Andy obviously mentioned on the last podcast. I'm looking out onto a railway line right next to the stadium, Blundell Park, so I'm down the road from it. Harrington House is the guest house here, and you can see it's actually a very nice room indeed. But it's quite an interesting location to get into last night, when you have to kind of call a number to get somebody to let you in. It's all sort of remote access, and then when I got back at sort of half midnight, the doors were still open. So I was kind of like, will this be a good night's sleep? But it was okay. I got 4 hours in between writing my piece and then getting up to speak to you guys and chatting to people to try and find out what on earth United do from here. It was the pitch invasion at the end as well. Like, you had at the start of the game, United's team buses. It's one of these grounds that's so tight and kept in by this railway line that they had to kind of reverse into the gap by the players' entrance, where they've got apparently the only wooden stand in the Football League, is what the steward Michael was telling me before the game. Really nice guy. He said, "Oh, it's Laurie," and chatted to me because he's a United fan, and then he was able to watch the game. I saw him actually in the McDonald's later that night, getting my nuggets after the game. Bumped into him again, and he was like, "Oh, great to see you," but yeah, that was bad, wasn't it? He enjoyed the fact that he'd seen United play, but yeah, wow, not the real United, I don't think. And then obviously the kids were on the shoulders before the game, kind of heckling the United players off the team bus. Some choice words, let's say that. Let's keep it PG for the YouTube crowd that are watching. But then there was a kind of nice echo from their point of view at the end of the game, when they're able to run on the pitch, get on their parents' shoulders again and celebrate. But just so many bits to unpick. And I've only skirted the surface there. I know I've gone on for ages, so I'm going to now hand it back to you, Ian.
Thank you. Yeah, despite all those travelled tales, I'm still thinking about the bad news, aren't you, Andy? I mean, it's the most embarrassing night of Ruben Amorim's Manchester United career, to be honest, and it's not been a glorious tale for him, obviously, so far in charge of United, but it's just so far below the expectation, isn't it? And the thing I can't get my head around was the season's only 9 days old. Laurie's written in his article on The Athletic, this is the earliest that crisis mode's ever been activated. How have we got here so fast? Especially considering how positive the mood was just 9 days ago.
A horrific result, horrific performance, horrific weather. And I think the Manchester United fans are feeling pretty stunned. United needed to not just win that game, but needed by playing well. They needed goals. Grimsby are in the 4th division. The League Cup was a respect of cup competition, which Manchester United could have excelled in this season. It offered a chance of European qualification, and that's all gone. And Grimsby Town deserve their victory. They were a better team. They could claim that they scored a 3rd goal, but this podcast focuses on Manchester United, and that resultant performance was offensive to the travelling fans. Something has to change. If Manchester United, I know it was a much changed team, but there was still a lot of big name players in there. I kept thinking back to the MK Dons game in 2014, and there are a lot of similarities between them and now. A lot of those players didn't play again. I actually think a lot of these players will play again, but the manager's position comes into focus. I don't know what he's thinking. I watched his post-match interview. I think he was sending out several messages there. One of them was an apology to the away fans, and that's quite right. It needs apologising for. And we're still in August. There's been a pretty fraught start to the seasons. I remember a big hullabaloo after that defeat at Brentford, and back to 14-15 when Swansea won at Old Trafford and United didn't win in any of the first three, and MK Dons put 4 past Manchester United. The solution then was to go into the transfer market, spend big. That can't really happen now unless Manchester United move some players on. And we're sure we'll talk about that. But a pretty disgraceful night in the history of Manchester United.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk about what happens next in terms of transfers. But you mentioned there about Ruben Amorim's post-match. I think now is probably a good time to listen to a bit of that and then try and dissect what we think he meant with his comments.
When everything is so important in our club, everything that happened, it's a problem in our club. We should do so much better. So I just have to say sorry to our fans, and I felt my players spoke really loud today what they want.
Can you just elaborate on that? What you mean? Your players spoke very loud on.
I think it's easy for you. Let's focus on the next game, and then we have the stop for the international games. We will think things through. The feeling is the same. I think football was really fair today. The best team won. So I'm the manager. It should be my job to understand what happened. Again, I'm really sorry for our fans. Let's focus on the next game.
How do you turn this around then, Ruben? In terms of the same mistakes as previously, you've got more time now on the training pitch. You've had a bit of a pre-season. I know it's not your squad entirely, but
guys,
you've got some players.
I would like to say very smart things and very important things. I have nothing to say, and that is the biggest problem also, is that to see the same mistakes and nothing to say in this moment. I'm really sorry for our fans. It's too much sometimes. You cannot change everything in one summer, but you need to win games. You need to don't show this kind of performance. I think that this is the little bit the limit. I think something here has to change, but in this moment we need to focus on the weekend, and then we have time to think.
So you heard Laurie there in conversation with Ruben Amorim amongst the press back on the pitch at Grimsby Town. These sort of unique situations where big club goes to lower league side and there's not even enough room to hold press conferences and things like that. United have been there before. They've had results like this before, Carl, but it doesn't feel like it. And for Ruben Amorim to speak like that, I mean, the quote, I don't know if it was from that particular interview or one of the other interviews that he gave after the game, but he repeated the line over and over again, that the players spoke really loud about what they want. How did you interpret that?
It sounds like a Rubicon has been crossed. It sounds like we've gone across a threshold, and Amorim believes his players are either unable or unwilling to execute what he wants to the level in which he wants it. Now, when that usually happens for a coach, you enter a negative spiral that some form of change happens, which is likely the head coach or the manager loses his job. Amorim sounded broken in those post-match press conferences. Laurie will be able to attest as to how his face looked because he was there. But how he came across on television, how he came across in the club media interview, he sounded like a man who felt let down and also felt like a man who had run out of ideas. And that is very concerning. I think when Amorim is going, I can say something smart, but I have nothing. It kind of goes back to what we were saying a couple of weeks ago about, we know Amorim is charismatic, we know Amorim is a good talker, but Amorim needs to start winning games, and he's not. And he hasn't been winning games in a convincing manner for a long time. Amorim's come into press conferences and said, we were the better team after results where they have failed to win. And he's also coming into press conferences and saying, we weren't good. So this is This is a football team that can't win games when they play well, and this is a football team that can't avoid defeat when they play badly. And when that happens, people tend to lose their jobs.
Laurie, you were there. How did you interpret it?
Yeah, it was kind of frustrating that I didn't hear the full ITV interview, because that was the one where he said you can't change 22 players again, something like that, right? And then the international break kept being brought up as well. So the implication to me is that they're going to have talks during the international break. You know, you've got the Burnley game coming up on Saturday. Let's get through that. Then let's talk about the future. It felt like that to me, rather than then let's get to the training pitches at Carrington and work with these players, because a load of these players will be off playing international games, won't they? So how many will they actually have?
Some might be sold, in fairness.
Well, this is going to be fascinating now, the last week of the transfer window. Does this situation change plans? Does it accelerate ideas? You know, does it totally shift the perception that we've had on certain players going out the exit door? It's really fascinating. I mean, in all honesty, I feel like on reflection, it's hard to pick your questions in the heat of the moment, but I think it was probably fair to say the way you're talking here, Ruben, if I'd heard the full interviews with everybody, are you getting to a point where you're going to put your position up again? Because that is something that he did at the end of last season, and he spoke to us about it in Chicago. He was good enough to be upfront and honest about that, and it felt like that's what he was getting towards. Now, I hope I'm not interpreting that incorrectly, but obviously he was given opportunity to clarify, and he kind of kept saying, you know, let's get to the international break. So
he's smart enough to know that what he said leaves it open for interpretation, and one of those interpretations is that he is considering his own future, I would suggest, or that the players don't want to play his way effectively.
Yeah. And now let's say, is this, you know, we've been here before and he's stayed, you know, he's an emotional guy after the game, you know, very much so. You've reported on that after the Brighton game in particular. So, you know, does this just mean that, okay, he said his thing, he's been strong, because how can you be weak after a performance like that? As Andy's saying, an appalling night for Manchester United. It's got to be one of the worst nights in their history, right? I mean, how, you know, it's a unique occasion. They've lost to a fourth tier team and been the worst team. So you have to be, you know, probably quite extreme in your post-match analysis of that from a manager's point of view. But then where does that leave you? Can you bring it back from that? You know, do you want to? Do you have the energy for it? I mean, I was sort of watching the game as the rain fell, and he was there, and you're just thinking, this picture is incredible. 2-0 down, the scoreboard it is in front of us in our eye line, and he's sort of positioned, you know, closer to us. He's just taking the rain. I was kind of thinking, you know, at least he's not done a Steve McLaren and kind of got the brolly out. You know, he's kind of facing this sort of torrential weather, but then, you know, the kind of tactics board gets brought out, and we couldn't see that, but obviously a lot of people have picked up on that and kind of think that might be now a symbol of his tenure, and it's difficult, I think, to get past that. You know, players see all this, and I know it's only, as you say, 9 days from feeling quite positive about the season. You know, that first performance against Arsenal, you know, people in the hierarchy were thinking that was really good, you know, in terms of the actual performance level, and it just didn't get over the line, and that could be a platform for something. But to get to this point now, it just feels a very difficult situation to retrieve, to be honest.
Yeah, Andy, you were nodding throughout most of that. I mean, what does happen next? How much of a reconsideration is there across the club about the way United are playing, the transfer decisions that are about to be made, the fact that Ruben Amorim is the one leading the club? And obviously he's been hugely backed by those in power. The new hierarchy are as wedded to Ruben Amorim's ideas as he is, it feels like.
It can mean several things. It can mean one thing. Do Manchester United change the tactics? So he's welded to this idea of a formation, and he talks about the flexibility within that formation. I spoke to first team players on the tour, as did Laurie. I don't think that good mood on the tour was made up. I don't think it was false. I genuinely think that, you know, and you were at the Carrington as well, Ian. I remember you saying something similar. Yeah. And there's a lot of emotion swirling around today, with good reason, because it is a horrific result, and that emotion will ebb away, but that result will be in the record books forever. The mood, believe it or not, will feel slightly different before Burnley on Saturday. It's clearly a huge game. Can't believe we're looking towards a bridge of the international break when we're still in August. I think that the manager is between a rock and a hard place now. Does he compromise his tactics? I don't think he's lost all of his players, but as you said, he has been backed significantly so. In fact, more so over the summer. He's brought in even more staff from Portugal. And the new decision makers at the club, Amorim is the man. We were promised a bright future, and I think the fans have been incredibly patient and incredibly supportive. Now, fans were singing for Ruben Amorim as recently as Sunday afternoon at Fulham. Mm-hmm. And outsiders are utterly baffled why Manchester United fans are so supportive of a coach who is struggling to get results. And this is the bottom line. You're judged by your results in football, and United's results have been awful. Even then, I think there is a patience from supporters. They know that a big rebuilding job is needed, but there's got to be minimum requirements. And if you can't overcome a fourth-tier team, the alarm bells are ringing. Of course they are. It's a natural reaction. They will be in the dressing room. They will be at the club. A lot of money's been spent by Manchester United, and these big-name, highly remunerated players were not just incapable of overcoming Grimsby Town, they were battered in the first half. Absolutely battered. They were inviting pressure on long before that first goal. Mm-hmm. And when you invite pressure on, chances are going to come from that. And believe it or not, chances did come. And Grimsby, to their credit, took them. So there's a new game on Saturday, but this is a really difficult time. Manchester United are in a storm right now. There's a storm most days with Manchester United because the world demands one, but it's a genuine one today.
Andy's brought up backing of a manager, and I really want to go over what we mean by we say we back a manager. I think it's a lot more complicated than just giving someone time and money. To back someone as a friend or a business partner is not just doing whatever is possible to accentuate their strengths. It's also doing what you can to cover up their weaknesses and protect their weaknesses, because every manager has weaknesses, and every manager has weaknesses. Every tactic has some sort of flaw that can be exploited, and you need to do something you can do to cover it up. And the best way I can describe it is how Ian backs all of us three on this podcast. Because when Ian backs me, because when it's time to ask a question about tactics, he goes, "Oh, I'm going to direct this towards Carl, because there Carl can show off the things that he thinks he knows loads about." But Ian also backs me because when we are talking about things like, say, stadium culture, and I freely admit, I grew up in the South. I didn't go to Old Trafford too much as a child. Those questions do not get directed towards me. They get directed towards Laurie and towards Andy. That's how he backs me. He does things he can to maximize my strengths, and he does things he can to limit my weaknesses and make sure my weaknesses are not as obvious. The comment section can laugh about all this now. And the thing I think constantly with Manchester United post-Ferguson is they believe that backing the manager, the higher-ups believe backing the manager is just, here is some money, get your players and crack on. And I'm constantly going, this person very clearly has weaknesses. What are you doing to cover them up? And I felt this with Ten Hag going, Erik Ten Hag very clearly is not the most charismatic speaker. Can you do something to help him? And I'm more than beginning to. There are certain things that Amorim does. I'm going, could United do something to cover up these weaknesses? This is a manager who gets incredibly emotional after defeats. Is there someone around that go, take 15 minutes, cool your head off? This is a manager. Well, in fact, this is a head coach who refers to himself as a manager, and yet we're doing all the things to make him believe he's a manager by giving responsibilities in terms of player trading. He's got a very, very young assistant cadre around him, and there's loads of questions we get in emails about what are we doing at set pieces, and going, should a 30-year-old be in charge of set piece training at one of the biggest football clubs in the world? Ruben Amorim's been given money. I don't think Ruben Amorim's been backed, because I think Manchester United are really bad at covering up their manager and indeed many of their players' weaknesses. And that's how you get results like this constantly every season.
I think he has been back, Carl. I think he's received a lot of emotional support. I think he's got a very close connection with the people around him. He speaks on a very daily basis on a daily basis, even not even a very daily basis, to Omar Barada, to Jason Wilcox, is in regular contact with Sir Jim Ratcliffe. If you contrast that with Eric Ten Hag, who I think knew he was a dead man walking in the months before that he went, I also feel that Amorim's protected in terms of the only media he does is the contractual stuff. I don't think he would do any given a choice, but clearly he has to do stuff. I think he's left alone. I think he's indulged. We talk about the Portuguese lot at Carrington. And also, to be fair to him, and he's right, you're not just going to turn this round in 1 or 2 transfer windows. It's going to take 3 or 4 or 5. And for that reason, I don't think United fans, who've also indulged him, think the team are going to win the league this year. But when you're losing to Grimsby, that is just a slap in the face by a big wet fish, where you're like, whoa, whoa, this is alarm bells ringing.
Andy, do you think he should be indulged? Isn't indulging someone ignoring the person's weaknesses and letting them crack on? Am I making sense?
Yeah. What are his weaknesses?
He's incredibly wedded to a formation that has had limited success in England, and a formation that, particularly in midfield, requires 2 incredibly mobile athletes, and he has maybe 1 midfielder capable of doing that job, right? If I've spoken to 2 or 3 coaches about how you sort of turn a fullback into a wing back, or turn a winger into a wing back, and they often talk about something called the triangle angle. So how that wing back interacts with your midfielder and how they interact with the third centre back. And they say your third centre back's got to be very good at covering large amounts of space, and your midfielder needs to be quite comfortable running around a lot and also being comfortable in possession. When we talk about the good examples of 3 at the back in the Premier League, we are very often given Chelsea under Antonio Conte, and we've also given, to a lesser extent, Tottenham Hotspur under Pochettino. Chelsea had N'Golo Kante. Tottenham Hotspur had Moussa Dembele. United don't have a...
Did Poch play 3 at the back?
He did for a little bit. There was a very pronounced period where he changed to 3 at the back. Ben Davies did an interview on The Athletic talking about playing as a wing back in the 3 at the back. And he cites when he was blowing, he would just give the ball to Moussa Dembele to give him an extra 5-10 minutes. Who is the person that can give your wing-backs an extra 5-10 minutes to cover up their weaknesses because they're knackered in this United team? And there isn't one. It's 26-year-old Mainoo, maybe, and this is it, right? In that Amorim's system does not hide the weaknesses of a lot of players in that team. It doesn't cover up the weaknesses of Bruno Fernandes. It doesn't cover up the weaknesses in Manu Ugarte. It doesn't cover up the weaknesses I'd have no idea how you cover up the weaknesses in Andre Onana right now, because he's just in a really bad funk. And so on and so on and so forth. And I'm sure, there is no doubt in my mind, someone at Manchester United has had a word with Amorim and gone, you might have to change this because you're getting done here. And it's just reaching a really uncomfortable...
The issue is, Carl, so you talk about being backed by the structure over the last 10 years. Since Ferguson retired, Ferguson was a sporting director basically, as well as manager. He was the whole club. Yes. Since that point, you've had Ed Woodward in charge of football, basically, who didn't know football beforehand. People would argue didn't know football by the end. Then ultimately you had John Murtagh being promoted to football director, hadn't been in that position before. Mm-hmm. Even now, United are trying to transpose what Man City have done across town with Omar Barada as chief executive and Jason Wilcox as director of football. They haven't been in these positions before, in these lofty positions. So in terms of backing them, yes, they obviously have got qualities, I've no doubt about that, but that the ability to manage in this environment, Manchester United, where the pressure is on all the time, you've got big egos, you've got a manager that clearly has a very strong personality. That management of him, there's still questions in terms of their capacity to do this job. I'm not saying that they can't. Obviously the proof will be in the pudding. But so I think you've got a whole range of issues that don't just focus on Ruben Amorim being up to the task. I think it kind of goes wider than that. And like I say, I think it's too early to cast judgment totally on that. But I think it's certainly a question to raise.
we've had an absolute influx of questions. I don't feel like I'm going to read any of them out during the podcast because I want to make the conversation flow. I want everyone to have the say. It feels like everyone's got a lot to say today as well. So forgive me for not reading out any of your questions, but I hope that the conversation's reflecting it. One of the huge questions that we've had repeatedly, Andy, and even more so after last night, is will the formation change? Carl's spoken about it there, and some of the issues that United have got playing this way. You could interpret what Ruben Amorim said after the game as the players not feeling like this is the right formation. Whether that's exactly what he meant, I'm not exactly sure. But even when they were chasing the game, even when he's bringing players on, he's sticking Mason Mount at left wing back. I think Diogo Dalot played like 4 different positions in the game last night as well. To not even change shape when you're chasing a game away at League Two Grimsby feels like him digging in even more than ever. And I don't know, is that really what United need at the moment? Or is that exactly what they need because they have to double down on this because this is the only way he will manage United? Even that in itself can be a criticism, clearly.
United need wins more than anything. I think that fans know that any tactical change is going to take time, but I don't think it's unreasonable to expect Manchester United to be beating a 4th tier side, and for a manager to have the wherewithal tactically for his players to overcome that and not be slaughtered from the start. Will he change his tactics? I don't know the answer to that. I don't know whether that's the hill that he dies on. Louis van Gaal is quite interesting because he had to change. He felt that he had the system, but he didn't have the players. Ruben Amorim may say the same thing now.
Eric Ten Hag was similar as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, I feel with him, if he changed, it's almost like he's betraying himself because he's on such strong principles that he's come in and he's like, okay, this is going to be really difficult, we're going to lose, but it will come good. And I've spoke to top coaches who've said to me, and I've said it on this podcast, you know, you need players with high technical and emotional ability. If it comes off, it's really nice. And we saw little bits of that with his sporting team. And I think football tactics are changing. I spoke to David Moyes last month. He said it's moved on from that Pep Guardiola dominating the ball. Things are changing. And we've got enough tacticos at the Athletic to read more detail about that. He needs wins. Otherwise, I'd normally say otherwise he's going to lose his job, but I don't even think that's clear because he's been brought in and he's so wedded not just to his own tactical system, but to the personnel at the club. But then you've got Sir Jim Ratcliffe above it. And then you've also got the Glazers, who not unreasonably can be going, wait a minute, you said that you were going to improve things. Things are actually getting worse and significantly worse. Manchester United finished 15th last season. Under the Glazers, the team were finishing 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 7th, 8th, 5th, 4th, 4th, whatever. It's now miles worse. And I think fans and people at the club are like, okay, this is a major structural change, a major tactical change. We will be patient. But there's almost no signs. Apart from Arsenal a couple of days ago, there were signs there. But judged by a larger body of work, there's very few signs that this is actually working.
Yeah, that's a problem, Laurie, isn't it? I mean, it's the record that Ruben Amorim has got in charge of Manchester United. 45 matches now he's had, 17 wins, 7 of them are in the Europa League, obviously, and we know the way that ended. 9 draws, 19 defeats, a win percentage in the Premier League of 24.7%. Now, even David Moyes, who only got 10 months into a 6-year contract at United before he was sacked, has the second worst win percentage. That's 50. It's more than double what Amorim's currently on. So what is the change that makes that record better for Amorim, for the club? What needs to happen next?
I just don't think he'll change formation. I just think that's it now, right? Like you can't. He's so far along that road that to shift now would just unravel everything that he's been talking about. So I don't think he can do that.
But the flip side of that is that it's unraveling anyway. So do you not want to change something to rescue this situation? I mean, I know he said he won't do that, but like we've talked about, other managers have had to do that in charge of United just to get through this period. I know in the end that's maybe not brought the long-term success that everyone craves, but to even survive this, I mean, I can't believe we're doing another one of these podcasts just 9 days into a new season. I did not expect this
9 days.
When I was walking up to Old Trafford just a couple of Sundays ago.
Yeah, well, obviously it was November, wasn't it? When it all was shifting around, emergency pods were activated, and we're not.
There's been a couple of
we're still sort of 3 international breaks away from that. So, it's mental how it's come to this so soon. I suppose that's what you get when you have someone like Amorim in here. Ideologue. You mentioned Pep Guardiola earlier, Andy, and I think that has sort of led to perhaps, and really he does take a lot of sort of inspiration, I think, from Jose Mourinho, actually, who did adapt and was malleable. But it feels like a lot of head coaches have an idea in their mind, and that's what they have to stick to, and then the players have to adapt to that, and so you then get these kind of crunch moments where, okay, what's going to give if the results aren't there? He says that you can't change the players again. I just don't see how he changes formation when he hasn't done it, as Andy says, away to Grimsby Town. I mean, and I'm going to get my, get criticised for this, but Mason Mount actually did quite all right on the left wing back role. He's putting those balls in, but obviously that's very small crumbs, and that is not a long-term solution. So what is the solution? I mean, the kind of the signings that have actually been brought in as well, as you said, bad nights, really. I know Mbeumo got his first goal, really nice finish, but ultimately misses the penalty that then sparks the pitch invasion, and he has to get escorted off the pitch by Bruno, and the new team manager went across as well and kind of was protecting him from the goading. Matheus Cunha had a chance to win the game, really poor penalty. Benjamin Sesko didn't really do anything. Patrick Dorgu gets hooked at half-time after hitting the roof of the stand behind the goal with one cross. Manuel Ugarte gets hooked again after being ineffective. Lenny Yoro had the best night of all the sort of signings since Sir Jim Ratcliffe's come in. He was back at home. He was sort of free of this blemish. And I suppose what I'm kind of building towards is there's going to have to be, sort of pretty big talks with all these people that run the club, not least Sir Jim Ratcliffe, who obviously, has an influence on various matters. He's spoken about his relationship with Ruben Amorim, how he appreciates his kind of blunt speaking, and maybe the way that Amorim was speaking after the game was a bit more of that, and sort of him showing, Ratcliffe that's what he's about. I do also wonder, at some point, does Amorim have to think about his own reputation beyond United, whenever that might come? If he changes now, does that, tell people in future years that he would change if when it gets really tough? But I take your point that, the stats are just, embarrassing, aren't they? Alarming, any kind of word you can use to describe it.
Well, I don't know what's more damaging, not changing or sticking with something that's providing those results. Obviously, he thought that pre-season and time on the training pitch would change it. Presumably this morning, when he's thinking about it, if he's sticking to his guns, he will believe that this will get better under this system, and that United can play this way and be successful in the Premier League. And hopefully that's still the case. But yeah, Burnley now feels huge, Andy. Far bigger than any game against Burnley should be, really.
Yeah. Do you know that Burnley was also the third game of 14-15, the last time this happened? And that was a 0-0 draw.
Scary. Lose your first game at home, draw away, get knocked out of the League Cup in the second round to a lower league opposition, and then play Burnley. It was 0-0 last time. It can't be this time.
So you're telling me United are going to finish fourth?
Exactly. There was a massive upturn in that. So United's failure to get results is now costing the club money. So always look at the bottom line in football. So a good run and winning the League Cup would have brought in tens of millions of pounds. It would have brought in more full houses at Old Trafford. I saw the draw last night. I think Grimsby are away at Sheffield Wednesday. That would have been absolutely welcomed by Manchester United fans. Another trip to Hillsborough. There's all these sort of side issues that football fans engage in. We were all gone to Hillsborough. There would have been loads of different talking points as well. And the Burnley game is a massive game. I was at Turf Moor on Saturday, so I actually studied the Burnley team. They had a really good win against Sunderland. Mm-hmm. I didn't meet too many Burnley fans who felt their team would stay up, but that was a massive 3 points for them. And their CEO, James, he moved from Manchester United. He's one of the people who's moved as part of these changes to go to Burnley. So there's all these...
Polly Bancroft last night.
Exactly. and so many people have moved. There's like rivalries at every single... Well, not every single club, but a lot of clubs now.
She said that United would be surprised by the fact there weren't seats enough in the dugout, and that was true. De Ligt had to kind of sit on the floor to begin with to start the game. He was kind of amused by the situation. Wow.
It's also a strength of English football that these things do happen. It's absolutely horrible, but the joy that it brings to a town and a proud football club. Grimsby have got 150 years of history as well, but that's enough. Platitudes towards Grimsby. I'm not feeling like anymore.
I agree. We've not talked about the penalty shootout. We've not talked about Andre Onana's blunder for the second goal, the question marks for the first goal, Benjamin Sesko waiting to take the 10th penalty for Manchester United, which just seemed bizarre, to be honest. Ruben Amorim hiding from the whole thing in the dugout as well, which maybe if he thought there was going to be 26 penalties, he might not have done that at the start. I don't know. But that didn't look great either. But we need to talk about transfers. So I'm going to take a quick breath. I think we all need a breath and a sip of water, and then we'll come back to it. Okay, well, the build-up to Blundell Park was full of drama in itself, really, with speculation stronger than ever that Kobbie Mainoo's future at Manchester United was in question. Laurie, you wrote an article on The Athletic with Mark Critchley saying that Kobbie was open to leaving the club before the end of the window. He was deeply frustrated about not being involved in the first two league games and really that United had been considering a sale of Kobbie Mainoo for some time. We'll talk about the effect last night might have on that, but he obviously started the game as well. But fundamentally, this is a huge moment for Manchester United fans because an academy graduate like him really should be the symbol of what it's all about. No?
Yeah. And I think the reaction online and to our article, I think we had like 850 comments on it on The Athletic, which is, pretty unprecedented. Shows the feeling of emotion around it and the strong opinions around it. Yeah, I mean, you've explained the situation there very well. Obviously, there's more details in the piece in terms of his mindset. I think the fact that you had Harry Maguire and Aidan Heaven going on instead of him at Fulham when United needed a goal, plus then also off the back of the Arsenal game, him not getting a look in, when he has produced moments in clutch situations, at Wolves, in the FA Cup final, against Lyon, obviously. And I'm not saying he's infallible. Obviously, he has had his own issues in terms of, perhaps letting runners go at corners or whatever. And maybe that was in Amorim's mind because he's big on set pieces, right? And that's what the whole Maguire and Heaven thing was about. And Maguire nearly scored at Craven Cottage and did do at Blundell Park, obviously, from a corner by Mason Mount. But I think the Kobbie Mainoo situation, then that for him, raised the prospect, well, what am I doing here? Am I going to get a chance? The fact that Amorim said that he's in competition with Bruno Fernandes, very specifically, I think he has sort of alluded to that a little bit before, but it's been more within, he could play other positions as well still, whereas again, after Fulham, it was very much it's him or Bruno, and you're sort of thinking, well, Bruno's not going to be dropped from the team. And I think then Kobbie Mainoo was thinking a similar thing and evaluating his own options before the window closes because he's got a future to think of, and it's World Cup year as well. With England, he's starting the European Championship final in 2024, and he's obviously nowhere near it under Thomas Tuchel at the moment. Ultimately, I think that whatever happened last night, I think my hunch would be that Kobbie Mainoo would stay, because this has been a situation, as we reported, that it has been going on for a little bit of time, both from his point of view, from United's point of view, sort of looking at maybe what's out there, and nothing's come to fruition at this point. Bayern Munich, as far as our information is, were having a look, but nothing formalised at that point. But clearly he's a very talented player, very coveted by a lot of clubs. But I guess the price point and, what it might take to get him to their clubs, is a factor for people that are looking at him. I think it just sort of pulls back the curtain on a very interesting situation, fascinating dynamic. I mean, I think he had to start against Grimsby, didn't he? I'm glad that he stayed on for the full game. I'm, very happy that he scored his penalty, because I think then the story perhaps becomes a little bit about him, even though I think the wider context is obviously going to be Amorim. But yeah, it's going to be really fascinating to see what happens in the final few days of the window, and then ultimately longer term with him, because I agree with you, Ian. I think he is the kind of player that this is what United should be about. That run with the academy graduate being in the squad as well, I think it is important. I don't think it's just figurative, and clearly he's a highly technical player and has got, you know, room to grow into his game. So yeah, fascinating one to observe.
Yeah, it shouldn't be about tokenism. It shouldn't be about just including people for the sake of it. But I think Kobbie Mainoo's proved over time that he deserves to be a player who can play in Manchester United's first team. The debut at Goodison Park was the first sign. The way he then shot to England, shot to scoring in the FA Cup final, performing at a very, very high level, showing maturity way beyond his years. He looks like someone that United were going to build their team around moving forward. So to get to this point, and you could see the strength of feeling, Andy, with the responses on email, the response online to the story as well. And to me, it makes me question, how much do you think the hierarchy values the club's record of having an academy graduate in every single squad since 1937? Because obviously Garnacho's up for sale, Rashford's gone out on loan, McTominay left last summer. There's the excuse of PSR maybe, but there's so much of the identity of United has been eroded over the years with some of the struggles that they've had, and this is almost like the one last thing that fans have got to be proud about, and even that's in question now.
I think you'd have to ask him, Ian. I don't know the answer to that. There were real worries that Jose Mourinho would do away with it. And I think it was drilled into him, no, you don't touch this. And when I interviewed him, without even asking, he started going on about Marcus Rashford being the head of the talent and talking about the importance. So that was like, it was part of the club's DNA. And it is important. And you have seen the reaction to this. I feel sad, as I keep saying this word, when I see players moving out. Sad because he's a local lad, he's a United fan. I know his family. It's a really good story, and he scored in the FA Cup final in probably the high point of the last 5 years. If I'm going to play devil's advocate, I think United have been completely overpaying for players, and that's been a real problem. Young players in recent years. I think he's a victim of a system where you've got to play with basically two midfielders, and it's a rigid system. So it brings us back to the point, does Ruben Amorim change the system? I think being local is a strength and a virtue, but also it goes against him because being an academy graduate, that means he's more attractive to bring money in. I mean, what is he? I ask coaches about this, and I'm getting like, he's a box-to-box midfielder, and this system isn't the best for that. And yet when I ask people why Manchester United want to sign Carlos Baleba, they say, because he's a box-to-box midfielder. And I'm like, okay, there's 2 10s essentially ahead of him. There's not space for him in the system. But everyone I've spoke to tells me that Baleba has got a very similar profile to Kobbie Mainoo.
No.
But the only difference is, I'm speaking to high-level coaches, Carl. They're not lying to me. But one thing they pick out with Baleba, one of them said to me is, he's got 5 gears. Manchester United's midfield is full of players with 2-3 gears at top.
That's a distinct difference.
Yeah, I think that the one thing with Kobbie, goals and assists have got to come, but he's also incredibly young. So in a more stable environment, that talent could be nurtured. I say follow the money. Manchester United need money. Manchester United need to bring money in. I think it's by next June. The fans have cheered all the arrivals in this summer. Brilliant, break the bank, go for more. United need to bring money in. And I think money will come in. I think there will be sales in the last couple of days of the transfer window. But you've got lots of different pulls. And if you're Kobbie, you're probably very frustrated because you think you want to play football and you're not getting the chance you deserve.
I can't say anything better than what Andy said there. I think he's really hit the nail on the head about the double-edged sword of being an academy graduate at Manchester United. And I think particularly for Mainoo, not only is he a very impressive Manchester United academy graduate, but he's an academy graduate in one of the biggest problem positions United have had for 10 years. we know Carrington can make good strikers. We know Carrington can make good wingers. We know Carrington can make good centre-backs. Carrington hasn't made this sort of midfielder in a very long time. And you can get into the weeds and a big debate as to whether or not Pogba counts or whether or not Ravel Morrison is similar to Mainoo. But there have been times when Mainoo has felt almost like the prophecy child of, oh my God, how do we solve our midfield problems? We've had this problem since Michael Carrick hung up his boots, and then Mainoo he's there, and you're going, oh my goodness, somehow it's there. And I think that has fed into some of the depth of feeling. And 20 minutes ago, I talked about 26-year-old Mainoo. One thing football loves when a good young player emerges is sort of future casting, how good they might be in 5 or 6 years. And I can't wait to see 26-year-old Mainoo, not only because he would have played loads of games, but also I want to see which way he develops. Does he become more of an attacking player? Does he become more of a defensive player? And it seems like Amorim, for understandable reasons, doesn't have time to think about the Mainoo of the future. He has to focus on the Mainoo of the now, and the Mainoo of the now isn't well suited to this 3-4-3, and therefore this is a head coach who is less cool, who is less enamoured with Mainoo's talents compared to his predecessors, and that's difficult. Should Amorim have this viewpoint or lens? That's at your discretion. But I also...
The other question, sorry, Carl, is that should he have this power? Because this feels like a fundamental decision for the way Manchester United are headed in the symbolism of it, Laurie. So whose decision would it be, or whose decision has it been that Kobbie Mainoo has been available for transfer, do you feel?
Yeah, well, this is it. Obviously, Ruben Amorim has a strong voice on this, right? But ultimately, decisions are taken by the club. You know, Jason Wilcox, as Andy says, speaks to him regularly, is watching training sessions, you know, has his own judgments on players very strongly. For my knowledge, was an advocate for Manuel Ugarte coming in, for example. And so, you know, you've got this triumvirate, I suppose, at the top of the club with Omar Barada, Jason Wilcox, Ruben Amorim. Then you've got the recruitment side of things, Christopher Vivell, but also Jim Ratcliffe at the top of it. I think that, to the original question, I don't think that this current regime are particularly... I don't know, they're not raising up academy prospects as the be-all and end-all. If they happen, then fantastic, and they definitely want a strong production line and they want to tap into the heritage of the club in that regard. But I think they will take pretty ruthless, kind of emotionless decisions on football transactions, particularly when it means that they can raise funds to, you know, buy players that they definitely do want in the team. And
is that not disregarding, though, the heritage by potentially putting the record under threat that they've had an academy graduate in every squad for 80 years, 90 years, whatever it is?
Yeah, I think so. But I mean, the record, we only sort of really found out about it sort of like 5 years ago, something like that, 6 years ago maybe. I can't remember exactly when the book came out by Tony Park, but
people really value it though, don't they?
They do now, yeah.
And I'm sure the club will have used it as a selling point to attract young players as well to the academy and to provide that clear pathway to not a transfer to another club but actually into our first team.
And I think it should sustain, absolutely. I think that should be, I don't want them to break this. I think it's an incredible, unique aspect of Manchester United that does really speak to the history of the place. But I'm just sort of trying to convey, I suppose, what their position is. And like I say, I don't agree with it, but that's what their mindset is in terms of a business and in terms of trying to generate something new for Manchester United and not being stuck in the past. Now, obviously, I think there should be some synergy with the past. You can learn lessons from how United became this great behemoth of a club. But, you know, we could get into very many stories around that that we can do on another podcast probably. But I do think ultimately it's a collective thing. It's not just Ruben Amorim thinking this guy isn't for me, let's get him sold, and they're going, okay, yeah, let's jump to it. I think there is more to it than that. And my final point on it would be Mainoo's skill set. Certainly, I can see his limitations in terms of the kind of, I think the difference between him and Belaber is that acceleration, right? That you guys were kind of, that's what you were touching on, I think, between you. Mainoo, I don't know if he'll ever necessarily get that, but I think his skills can be utilised, and isn't that sort of the job of a manager to make the best of the players shine their talents in the right system? Clearly he's an ideologue, right? He's kind of on this trajectory, and maybe that's where you get these situations where then somebody like a Kobbie Mainoo is considering, his future because, it seems like there's only going to be one path, and let's see how it all comes out.
Andy, what effect do you think last night has on the remainder of this window then? We've still got question marks over the goalkeeper situation. Laurie's written about Senny Lamans, the talks that are taking place with Royal Antwerp about signing that goalkeeper. There's Rasmus Højlund still to sort out. There's Garnacho still to sort out. Anthony, Malacia, Sancho. How does last night affect any of that, in your opinion?
So each of those are different, Ian. I asked a question probably 36 hours ago. I was told that Royal Antwerp are very keen to sell because, like many clubs in football, they want money as well. So do United pull the trigger on that one? Andre Onana didn't have the best game at Grimsby, if I'm putting that nice and delicately. I've got mates who are in the away end who said he was booed.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, I was going to pick you up early, Andy, because you were mentioning about the Ruben Amorim song, and just to sort of confirm, it wasn't sung last night, by the way.
Yeah. So while I've been recording this podcast, I've had a mate who was in the away end say not one rendition of the Amorim song. Everyone moaning about the system. The away end booing when Onana touched the ball.
Really? Okay, I didn't hear that. Wow.
After his mistake was a new low. So much for us hardcore fans being different. The abuse thrown at Diogo Dalot as well. It was an
Christy
interesting
Pym nearly
night.
Joined in as well, didn't he? Admitting to the away end that he was a Manchester United fan and then saying he was half fuming with the result at the end as well. It sounded like he wanted to be in the away end.
Yeah, that's Benny McCarthy scoring against Man United for Porto and being devastated because he's also a Man United fan.
Yeah.
And so that's the goalkeeping situation, which is clearly a major issue because we've seen the start of this season. I think Garnacho will probably go to Chelsea. It's about the numbers.
Do you think
Anthony
do you think the numbers change though after last night? Because clearly, Ruben Amorim is the one who's very clear that he didn't want Alejandro Garnacho around. So do United hold out for a bigger number now because last night means that Amorim's future's in question, or is that just a totally separate issue?
Well, I asked what the numbers were, and United were asking for 50 and Chelsea were thinking more 35. So I don't think that's an impossible bridge.
No, okay.
Similar numbers for Rasmus Højlund as well. I think it's quite interesting what's going on with Real Betis and Anthony because they keep asking for a loan and United want a sale, which is absolutely Manchester United right. So are Real Betis doing this to show their fans, look, we're going for him, but actually, did he have the money to go for him? I'm reasonably confident that Manchester United will bring in good money before the transfer window closes because all these other clubs who are interested, their world isn't perfect either. If you're Napoli and you've just lost Romelu Lukaku, you need a striker. And so you look at Rasmus Højlund. Rasmus Højlund has got several suitors. Newcastle United had a look at him. Fulham even had a look at him. But his wage profile is too much for Fulham. And Fulham obviously don't sign players anymore.
Carl, what do you think happens in the remainder of the window? Do you think it's just carry on regardless, or do you think that there will be a reaction like there was with MK Dons all those years ago?
I don't think United can spend money in the same way they did in 2014. I don't think it's going to be Daily Blind, Falcao on loan, etc., etc. But I think it will cause a shift. So I've worked with our goalkeeping consultant, Matt P, to analyse Lamans. There's nearly 2,000 words in the back end that I wrote over the weekend, and the expectation was we were going to run it sometime this week because we thought the deal was close to being done.
I hope this is another Carl Anka ghost piece that doesn't ever see the light of day. Come on, we need this.
Up with the Cucurella. However, much like a bit like when United were going to be in for Cucurella and they changed at the last minute for Reguilon. However, when you lose in the way you do against Grimsby Town, and you have, let's call it a confidence problem with both of your senior goalkeepers. I'm going to take Tom Heaton out of this, because goalkeeping is a particularly differently scouted, and once it becomes known you have a weakness as a goalkeeper, players tend to go after that weakness over and over and over again until you essentially adapt or you snap. And I think, while it makes sense to go for Lamans before this defeat, I think this defeat might also see United go, hang on, we need to get a bigger, more experienced lad in who can take over from day one. So I think that might be one way things change. I unfortunately would like to pour water on the remaining Belabours who think that this defeat might spur United to conjure 100 million out of somewhere and get a deal done there, because when you're this close towards the end of the window and you are known for, you are now a distressed football club, shall we call it. Football clubs aren't necessarily going to be giving you discounts, and are not necessarily in the business of doing you favours. And I think what might happen in this window is a lot of skullduggery. Like 35 million Chelsea are approaching United for Garnacho is, Ollie, please bleep out what I'm about to say. It's a Garnacho is not 35 million. Behave yourself. Particularly in this summer where I'm seeing wide forwards go for 50 million minimum. Garnacho's 50 million minimum, right? And the fact that Chelsea are trying to undercut their give over. And I think you might see some of that. I think Real Betis are trying to pull one over Manchester United for Anthony. Alone, behave. He took you to the Conference League final. And I think Wilcox and the rest of the recruitment team need to be nasty and start telling people to behave and give over, because you've got 9 days to go, plus asterisks, that transfer window in Turkey, which I think might affect Bayindir's future in particular as well. So in the short answer to what you said, I imagine a lot of chaos and a lot of short pivots, but I don't think it's going to be, here is a 70 million plus football player arriving at the last minute.
Last word, Laurie. It's certainly a test, isn't it? This remainder of the window, with the circumstance around the club, with the results, with the pressure on the manager, with the comments that were made after the game by him as well. It's a huge test, this, isn't it?
I thought you meant it was a test for us, just to talk about it and kind of go through it all and go through it again.
3 next week, which I'm about to tell everyone about in a moment.
Come on, here we go. Just when you thought you'd had enough. Yeah, it's going to be fascinating. I agree with Carl. I think it's going to be pretty wild. I think there's going to be, decisions being taken, daily, well, hourly, probably minute by minute, to be honest. You've seen that with the way that Ratcliffe operates. I certainly think he has strong opinions that he then will voice at different moments, and United's, the course of United's future then sort of shoots off in that direction. So yeah, I'm fascinated. I'm not ruling anything out, to be honest. I think it's going to be a late one, deadline day. They've got so much business to do in terms of the outgoing. Still haven't sold a player, so that's a huge aspect to it. And then what does that do in terms of the incomings? Yeah, Lomans, I'm told. I still have a theory that will happen, but particularly after last night, I don't see how you can continue this situation as with the goalkeepers right now. But as far as my understanding is, there's been no agreement reached with the club or with the player. So yeah, still work to do on that one. But yeah, the seagulls are currently squawking outside my window. I'm just ready to leave Cleethorpes, Grimsby, wherever I am, to be honest. And then yeah, let's see what the rest of the transfer window holds in the future of Manchester United.
Yeah, I think we'd all like to check out just at the moment. So let's leave it there on Talk the Devils. But Laurie, Carl and Andy, thank you so much for being with us. I'm going to end on a high note. So congratulations to Manchester United's women's team, who beat PSV 4-0 in the second qualifying round of the Champions League. They'll now face Hammarby on Saturday to get through to the third qualifying round. Obviously, they're trying to get to the league phase eventually of that competition. We're going to have Charlotte Harper on the show next week to preview the new WSL season and hopefully talk about Manchester United advancing to that final qualifying round for the league phase of the Champions League. And in terms of how the podcast is going to work, we've got an audio-only show coming to you, so an old-school podcast from Talk the Devils after the Burnley game, reacting to that, exactly what's happened with everything. And then our YouTube show will be back on Wednesday, once the transfer window's closed, to properly assess everything that's gone on throughout this summer transfer window and talk about the deals that have been done between now and deadline day. So don't miss that. Remember to subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already, and click the bell so you get a notification exactly when that drops. But if you've lasted this long with us, all I can say is thank you, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching this episode of Talk of the Devils. Don't forget to hit subscribe if you've not done already. Like the video and also get involved in the comments too. And click the bell to make sure that you never miss an episode with myself, Andy Mitten, Carl Anker and Laurie Whitwell. There's also our social channels at TOT Devils on Instagram, X and TikTok. Thanks for watching.